Om. Om.
Om.
Om. Shri Sai Ram, and welcome to Rasam with Raj. The journey of spirituality and experiences with the divine is something so personal to us, something that helps us go through times of strife and difficulty. And for our Navarathri special, here to offer the aspect of justice that we associate with the divine Devi Durga is investigative journalist Nivashni Nair Sukdhev. Welcome to Rasamudraj.
Hari Om and Om Sai Ram to you, and thank you so much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And let's begin right at the start with some of your earlier memories and associations with your faith.
Okay, so I am a Divine Life devotee. I have been a Divine Life devotee since I was 2 years old. I am formerly from Petermarisburg. So my family joined the Divine Life when I was two, which meant that I attended ashram and children's lessons every Sunday morning. And then we were very, uh, I think, very enthusiastic and very connected to the ashram in Mysore, the Divine Life ashram. And so that is where in terms of faith and teachings, that is where I first learned about my religion and all of the aspects of being a Hindu, which for me is a way of life. It's
Mhm.
a religion that is a way of life because whatever I learned in Sunday school was practiced daily. And so we were, as I said, very big in the ashram. And it's even now when I think about it, it still remains one of my greatest childhood memories. Waking up early in the morning, my brother, my sister, and I, my dad dropping us off, and we were different age groups. So my sister would go with the bigger kids, I was the middle, and then my brother little. And every week we'd learn something. And then as I got a little bit older, we used to go to yoga camp, which meant coming to Durban, to Reservoir Hills, and spending a week there. And then as we got older, it was La Mercy. But we were very immersed in our
Mm.
religion. As I said, it just became a way of life. And my parents um, are always of the view that if you pray about something and you believe it wholeheartedly, that your prayers would be answered. My parents don't leave room for you to even consider something not working out in your favor. So that is my early brush with faith.
I think that is so incredibly beautiful that even from such a young age, you found this path of connection. And which would you say is the teaching from the Divine Life Society that you resonate with the most?
So it's definitely serve. So as most people would know with the divine life, it's serve, love, accommodate. So in different phases of my life, different teachings applied. So with service to man, it has always been there from day one because we participate in seva on a personal level, as well as with the ashram and the organizations that we belong to. But I think from an early age, when I think of service, or the serve aspect, I think of how my mom and dad would always help people. I mean, as a little kid, obviously, I didn't have the means to, but
Yeah.
little things like if somebody needed a lift, my dad would give it to them. Or we were always taught from the divine life and up to now that when a beggar knocks on your door, it could
Mm,
be
God.
God. So we always, when it came to service, and then as I got older, when you start into the workplace, another teaching is bare injury. And while as a journalist, I am, and I'm also a very assertive person, it's very hard sometimes to bear injury. And I never understood it until the run up to my wedding. and you had like people irritating you, and um from the other side. And I remember my mother said to me, but Gurudev's teaching says bear injury, just ignore it. And exactly, when you ignore it, it has, you just, and then accommodate. When you get into the workplace, a lot of things irritate you as well, and you stand up for your rights, but sometimes you have to accommodate for another personality. So those are like the three that have really resonated with me throughout my life.
I think that it is so beautiful that these are the teachings, and it goes back to what you said about this being a way of life for you. For me personally, I identify so much with the seva aspect because my parents also really infused that into our lives from an early age. And like you're saying, it comes naturally when you see others practicing this. And in this
Yes.
instance, your mom and dad. And so true that sometimes it's a little reminder of where our values stand, like it came in at the time of your wedding. And it reminds me of a time when I heard something about when you ask God to give you courage. God doesn't give you courage. He puts you into situations where you had the opportunity to be courageous. So it's almost like this was the opportunity to practice
Yes,
bearing injury and to accommodate
absolutely.
others. And I think that it's so practical. It's so applicable to day-to-day life. Now, as you've grown as a woman, have there been times in your life when you felt like your faith was what pulled you through?
So growing up, I would say, if we're looking at as a child, I would say one of the times when faith mattered the most to me is I have polycystic ovarian syndrome,
Mm.
and I was diagnosed at 9 years old. And I have a son who's 8, and I cannot picture him being a year older than him and what I went through. And it wasn't just polycystic ovarian syndrome. It was like one of the most serious cases. Even
Mm.
as I got older, my doctor, when I got older, said that they've written in a medical journal, they wanted permission about my case because it was so
Um,
serious. And it was pure faith that got me through, because reading got me through. But I also found that you can get faith from other people's stories as
yeah.
well. So while I was praying to Gurudev all the time when I was in pain, and to help me get through this, because I was a 9-year-old who had to stay away from school, who my
Mm.
little brother had to always check if my dress was messed, if I was being hospitalized, and I would pray to Gurudev. But then I read a book with Judy Bloom, one of my favorite books by Judy Bloom, Hello God, Are You There? It's Me,
It's me,
Margaret.
Margaret.
Yeah, and Margaret is stuck between two religions. And and I got faith from that little girl, as well as me being the same age as Margaret. So that was my first brush with having faith. Interestingly enough, this went on for many years because I still have PCOS in my late 40s.
Yeah.
But in at that time, when I was a little girl, it was also other religions that prayed
Mm.
for me. My grandparents are Christians, and a special prayer was in the church, and our neighbors were Muslim, and they did a special prayer, and everybody around us prayed. And I realized that faith could be bigger than the religion that I come
Mm.
from. So that actually, and as you know, as Hindus, we are tolerant. As a divine life devotee, I pray to Jesus, I pray to Allah. It's in our books. So that was my like first real brush with faith and having to have it. Yeah.
It actually makes me a little bit emotional when you said that because it's so true that when we grow up in the types of communities that we've been in, and the faith and parts of faith vary so much, but the divinity is that same love that is joining us. And these prayers that are offered on our behalf are so wholehearted, it's so pure, it's so much of kindness. And that I think is what really is a true experience with the divine. It's the love that we find in other people. And you are a mom and you have a little boy. How have you shared your faith and your experiences with him?
So just to go a little bit back, I couldn't have a baby for 8 years. I was married for 8 years, and because I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, my son is a result of IVF,
Mm,
but it was numerous surgeries. It was 5 failed IUIs. It was 1 failed IVF, and it was a long journey. And interestingly enough, people of all religions prayed for me, everybody. I remember my brother, his pastor, had approached us and said, "Come and we'll pray for you." And even when we got to the church, he said, "What would you like for us to say? What name?" And I said, "Jesus is fine."
yeah.
And then we had Muslim people going to Bashapir and
Yes.
praying for us. And my doctor is a Sai devotee my doctor is a learned doctor in KwaZulu-Natal and South Africa. He's a professor. He's a well-known doctor, but he's all about faith. So he was going and he said, whenever we did a procedure, he would say, "I want you to go home and I want you to pray." And I remember once we were doing a procedure around Easter time, and he said, "You're going to go to the temple and you're going to pray." And then he went to India and he said, "I am specifically going to the temple." He's a Sai devotee, and I'm praying for all my patients. And so my sons, and my doctor said, he has patients of all religions. He said, "I do not care what you pray for, but when you start a journey towards fertility, you have to believe in something. It
Yes.
can be any religion. I will stand by you and you need to believe it." So my son's first brush with faith and religion was when he was being born, because my doctor sang mantras throughout my C-section. And his intern was a Christian, and he gave his intern a chance to sing hymns. My child was born at 900 grams. He was rushed
Mm.
to NICU, and he is a pure miracle. Um, Everybody says so. All babies are miracles, but mine was a warrior from the first moment that he was conceived. And so because he's grown up with my parents and with us, he knows. But his faith is very different because he's religious. He's he prays, but he is a true practicer. If there even is such a word. He reminds us daily when we sometimes want to be not bad, but like for instance, the other day, he wanted something, and to just keep him quiet, he wanted a game on his Nintendo. I said, "I'll get it to you for you after the shop." And when he got to the car, when I got back to the car, I said, "I'm ready for my game." I said, "No, but I just said that to keep you quiet." And he said to me, "But mommy, doesn't Sami teach us to never lie? And you just lied to me." And he is very practical as well. He loves animals, he loves birds, and this all comes from my parents, because my dad feeds the birds every morning, and although we don't live with them, they live in another town, he gets to see that. So we have taught him based on what we know, and we've also taught him about other religions. When he was very little, he was like 3 years old. He was so excited about the fact that Christmas was about the Savior being born because he had learned it in school. So he understands that. And from an early age, we've taught him to be tolerant.
Yeah.
So he does question. Example, 2 years ago for Diwali, I said, "We're putting out the lamps so Lord Rama knows our house and he's going to walk this path." "Oh, but mommy, you said that God is always with us. So Lord Rama should know where we live and he should already be here." So he does question, but we taught him what as best as we could.
There is so much about your journey that is just so profoundly beautiful, Nivashni. And if I think about the fact that your doctor would pray for his patients, my mother also had a fertility struggle for me. And I remember her saying to me, Doctor would go to church every Sunday morning. He'd keep his slate free because that's his time to go pray for his patients. And I can see the difference that it makes when your healthcare provider keeps you in such love and thought, and how that actually manifests. And of course, children do have a way of reminding us of what it is that we've taught. And at times it can be a little bothersome, for example, with the instance with the game. But it really is true that they are watching and they are learning, and that they learn from us. As an individual now, having grown up in this way, how do you feel that your relationship with the divine has evolved?
So I think that there are many times when I want to be angry
Mm,
about the world around me. And, as a journalist, every day I'm writing horrific stories. And I think, but why, God? And then I'm always reminded that it is the will of God, you know, that is just the way that it is. My relationship with God has evolved to the point where I understand that everything happens in God's will. When I was much younger, obviously, my infertility, I used to be angry, but I always believed it would happen. I find that as I'm older, I'm calling out to God more because I understand what's happening around me more.
mm,
I'm seeing that as get older, people we love are growing older
yeah.
and they may not be with us for very long. And so my relationship with God is directly influencing how I react to them as well,
Yeah.
because I know that this is death and life are part of, God's will. Last year, I found that my relationship with God was one of absolute imbalance because my
Mm,
father-in-law who lived with us had a stroke in May last year. And my mother-in-law died when we were married for just 8 months. And my husband's an only child. So his dad has lived with us for 16 years.
mm,
And just one sunny May afternoon, he had a stroke. And he ended up in hospital with advanced end-stage dementia. And from dementia, so he didn't even know who we were. And
yeah.
from dementia, he ended up getting hurt in hospital. And he had to move to like a rehab center. But he then ended up getting hurt in hospital and he got gangrene.
Mm,
And then we had to make the hardest decision ever to move him to a nursing home
mm,
because he could not be taken care of at home because they said to us he's absolutely frail. And from the get-go, doctors told us that he
yeah.
was not going to pull through. And then my husband had to make the hardest decision of his life, which still keeps him up at night. He had to decide to amputate his father's leg, not to save him, but to keep him free from pain over the next few days of his
Yeah.
demise. And I asked God, why are you so cruel to Rohan? The kindest person
Mm,
I know. My husband is kind beyond the point where you sometimes want to shake him because he believes in the good in everybody,
yeah.
everybody. And he's kind. He's a good son. He's a good father, but he's just so kind. And I was angry. Like, why did you have to, why? I can't
Mm,
understand this. And um, and my anger, it was over months now because my father-in-law actually passed away. It'll be a year on Saturday. So we're talking from May to September, every single day in hospital, etc. And having to now decide nursing homes and
mm,
and I couldn't understand it. And And we were like so angry. Well, I was. My husband, he was just numb. He was like
Mm,
completely numb. And then there were other issues to consider now because my father-in-law was very strict in what he and but I'll come back to that. But just to give you this. And so one day, when we were sitting and we knew, we just rushed home from hospital. It was actually probably like, it would be like, I think Friday, this week,
mm,
Friday would be a year since this conversation. And we were sitting in our lounge and we just like, because for all those months, we were just like living, but not
yeah.
living. And then my husband was just quiet and he was looking through videos of his father. And my son said, "But Daddy, do you know if Aja dies, he will be so happy with with Aji in heaven, and you must let him go now. And you have to because he just wants to be with his wife, and you have very good memories with Aja, but it's time to like let him go. He wants to go to Sami's house." And and then he said, my son said, "And Daddy, do you know what? Aja's gonna go there and he's gonna boast to Aji that he got to meet Riyav and she didn't." And it was only then did we realize that if an 8-year-old, 7 at the time, could understand death and what we all are destined for, I couldn't be angry. And so I accepted. But then a few days later, I was angry again because so my father-in-law, when my mother-in-law passed away, he sat us down, and he told my husband and I, um, you you know, um, he would like a Vedic funeral. His mother
Yeah.
was Gujarati, and he would like a full Vedic funeral without any rituals. And at the time, we didn't understand. He said he wanted no bhajans, no flowers, no 13 days, no 15 days, no 1 year ceremony. And he wanted his funeral to take place within 24 hours of his death. And he made me write it down. And I was like newly married then. And I was irritated because I was a new bride. And I said to him, "Please don't talk like nonsense here.
Mm,
Nobody wants to have this conversation." But throughout my marriage, he reminded us. And it was only after he passed away and we had to make those decisions, that we realized the reason why he did it was because he watched his son being alone when his wife died. And he knew that when he died, my husband would be alone. He's an only child. And he did it to make it easier for my husband. That was what it was. And we followed he had a beautiful funeral. We followed it. And then I was angry again because my husband's first cousin, his father's sister's daughter, was on the way home from the funeral when somebody threw a battery off a bridge and killed her. So I was angry again and I couldn't understand the will of God. And so And then there are some days when you are like, okay, this is your will. And everybody has a time to be born and a time to die. And so as I said, my relationship, some days I'm angry, but some days I'm not. But recently I've come to realize in the year, because it's going to be a year, that my father-in-law, what happened to him was for the best for him, because having dementia is not an easy thing.
yes.
And perhaps it was a test for my husband. Perhaps it was his karma. But at the end of the day, we came out strong only because of prayer. We are able to deal with this just because of our faith, if that makes sense.
There are so many nuances to the experiences you've had over the last 12 months, from your little boy being the one identifying with the path to you and your husband having to make those challenging decisions, and even to the wisdom of your father-in-law in the choices that he had made. And I can understand why you felt like it was a year of imbalance. And I think this is what the points in life when it helps to know that the divine is our friend. Because with a friend, you can argue. You can shout and you can scold and you can say, I don't know why you do this. And you can have those types of conversations because that is what the conversation is what actually helps you go through it. And even though it's at these times when you feel so angry, the mere fact that you say, I'm angry with you, or how can you do this? It's still remembering the divine. And that is something that
Yes.
we're always encouraged to do. And so at this point, I must ask you if there is someone who is watching, going through a challenging time and feels like they're disconnected from the divine, what would be your advice?
My honest advice would be to just be still and to just take a break, just step away from whatever is upsetting you and just sit down with yourself. Because, firstly, the divine is in you. And right now, I am seeing so many women on my WhatsApp statuses who I know personally. I'm just using this as an example, who are who I know personally are in terrible situations at work or in their life. And their statuses of since yesterday have been about the power of the goddess.
Yeah,
And yet they haven't recognized that the same goddess is in them, and
yes,
she always was in them. And the power is supposed to be in you. And so to recognize the divine, you have to recognize your own power, which is in you. And I think that's where it starts. Sit down and realize that you are part of some bigger thing. You know, you are created by some bigger thing. And for you to understand it, you have to open your mind. You
yeah,
have to leave any perceptions that you have. And it can be for all religions, because I think that God, in all forms, wants us to truly be happy.
yes,
And to be happy, we have to look to ourselves. So I would encourage that person to look to themselves. And then I'd also encourage that person, when I say to be still, as a Hindu, we have a lot of rituals, and I follow many of them. I participate in many of them. But I need for whoever is listening to this, going to the temple right now, you cannot find it in your heart to see God, is not going to make a difference. You have to sit down with faith. You have to put your hands together and lay it all out to the divine. Because doing the ritual is not going to make a difference if in here you haven't made the difference.
that is phenomenal, phenomenal guidance, Nivashni. And I think that it was the right decision for it to be you that represents Goddess Durga for our Navarathri special. In your professional world, you're there as an investigative journalist. You represent truth, you represent justice, and you also, through this sharing of experiences, you've also shown the softness that we associate with the divine goddess. So I want to thank you so much for sharing this and for being here. Hari Om.
Hari Om.